Well, here we are. We're on the road to Mass Effect's N7 Day 2025. I've already done a video about all the blogs and some of the news and stuff that we did. I'm doing things different than last year. Last year and a few years before that, I did this big, gigantic, uh, everything we know about Mass Effect 5 video, and it got really long. So I'm splitting it up into two. So if you want to see my video about all the blogs and news articles and things like that, check out my channel. Look at the video probably right before this one or close to it. And this video is going to be about all the media, some of the tweets, videos, teasers, trailers, all that. And we're going to do a pretty deep dive into all of those things. So, if you like that, if you want more of that, if you want to support my channel and all of those things, consider subscribing to the channel. Hit the like button so more people see it. And if you really want to support what I'm doing here, get things like this a little bit early, consider becoming a YouTube member. With that said, let's jump into the video. Okay, so at least for me, it all begins here. So there's a tweet on N7 Day 2020 where this person talked about the species that were in this very, very, very early concept art that shows a ship, which we now know is the Mud Dauber, in front of a sunset with a moon or another planet in between, and what appears to be a human, a Angara, a Drell, and a Solarian. And I think the reason I think this little tweet is important to show is Mike Gamble, who's leading the development of the next game and has for the last 5+ years, says don't be so sure about anything you just wrote. And as we go through this, especially now more than ever, I feel like this should be kind of the mantra for anyone who's covering the various things that we have been shown or have seen. That could be teasing the next game, or maybe aren't. Maybe some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today was just I don't want to call it bait, but just throwing some stuff out there to let us see what they're working on. Now, I do have a close up of this. I have it's just a bigger version of it. If you zoom in, it's not very high quality, so I'll stay out a bit. But yeah, I mean, this appears to be a human and a Gara, a Drell, and the Solarian in front of the big twin engine ship. We will see this again very, very soon. So I think it's something to remember with any gaming concept art. Something I'll establish at the beginning of this video. Just because we see concept art or something from a game doesn't mean that will ever come to fruition for that game. Just looking at Dragon Age the Veilguard, which was known as Dreadwolf before that, and then other names before that, depending on how you count what was the same game or what wasn't. Lots of art, lots of things shown back in the day for that never came to fruition. We now know that the game that became Veilguard, started production in 2022 and released 2.5 years later. If that happens here, say they go into full production on Mass Effect 5 in 2025, say the game comes out in maybe late 2027, early 2028, anything we've seen before now maybe won't have anything to do with it. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Okay. I now have headphones on, if you didn't notice the transition here, because we have the trailer from 2020. This was when they revealed both Dragon Age at the time. It wasn't even named back then, but Dreadwolf, which became Veilguard. After that, they had this trailer, which was the first any kind of visual, really, confirming the next game and giving a bit of a show of what it is. I am going to stop it throughout this and talk about it. If you want to watch the full thing, you can look it up on YouTube. So it opens here. This has always been poignant to me. We have, I believe, pretty obviously the Andromeda Galaxy in the back top left, and right in the forefront, taking up most of the screen, the Milky Way. I, back then and still to this day, think that this was a pretty big statement. While I believe much of the stuff we've been shown since this has maybe just been kind of thrown out there or may not be, canon or stuck on what they're going to do next, I still think partially because it's so vague that this trailer is still probably pretty core to what they're doing next, but that's all speculation. So now the camera is going to dive into the Milky Way. We're going to start hearing radio broadcasts. Many of them are from the trilogy and even from Andromeda. There's also some historical things in there where, the first man's first space launch, walking on the moon, things like that. It does transition into new audio that we had never got in the games, having to do with like the first contact protocol and presumably when we met the Turians for the first time for our little conflict. And then there's some other stuff we'll talk about in a moment. So there's the first contact protocol, presumably for the Turians. Partners in the galaxy. This is probably after that initial conflict when humanity discovers like, oh, holy crap, there's like a whole world of things going on out there. Man, that seems like kind of a big deal, being introduced to the Citadel Council and all that stuff. Arc 6 is away. Something that people have, I think is probably a pretty big deal. I suspect will be core to whatever they're doing next. For whatever it's worth, depending on how you count the arcs, Arc 6 is in theory one that we never knew about or heard of, even in Andromeda. Even if you dig through all of the codexes and all of the things, as far as I know, this trailer was the first time they ever mentioned anything about the arcs. It's also worth keeping in mind that Arc 6 away, that happened between, I believe, Mass Effect 2 and 3. So then from there, it's going to go on to giving us clues about or us hearing evidence of the Reaper War happening. Just to note, we're currently passing through what appears to be a deactivated relay, Mass Effect relay, but it's not blown apart like it is in the game under many circumstances. I can't remember if any of the endings have them intact still, but at the very least, it appears to not be active because it doesn't have the Mass Effect field within the spinning spherical device there.
Is anyone receiving this? We've lost contact.
Right here, there is the faintest audio. Against my better judgment, I've used like AI to try to decipher what's being said here. I've tried to mess with the sound and use some tools, and other people who are probably much more capable than me have done the same thing to just try to figure out what's being said here. Let's listen to it, and I'll discuss it in a moment. So right there, some people have been able to manipulate it. Even I have, to a point, have tried to isolate the voices and try to figure out what they're saying. It sounds like there may be someone talking about wormholes or something along that line. The reason that's significant is all of that audio at the beginning of this trailer is in, like a timeline. So it's, early space exploration by humans, then moving into the fiction of the Mass Effect story, discovering, the Mass Effect relay, establishing bases, discovering the Mass Effect fields, meeting Turians, getting into the Citadel. I assume the events of Mass Effect 2 are in there. The Arc missions leaving after 2, the Reapers in 3. And then at the end of that, presumably between the end of 3 and wherever we're going next, is this mention of wormholes. And I'll probably bring this up again, but the reason that's significant is that most recently in 2023, there's been some insinuation. We've seen art that has Angaras and Geth in the same place, and that doesn't really make sense with what we currently know about the world, at least as of the end of 3 in Andromeda. Here we transition to this part of the trailer. We see the 2-engine ship here. Like I said before, I believe it's been referred to as the Mud Skipper, going to a planet that I think people have looked through the game, the wiki, all that stuff to try to determine whether or not this is a planet actually in the game. And as far as we can tell, it's not. This is just a, whatever media graphics house they told to make this is either a planned new, this is a place that maybe we'll visit in the next game, or they're just like, I don't know, make a planet with some moons around it in the trailer. Like, so try not to overthink it. We have what is a really interesting and cool moment scene here, at least in my opinion. We have a figure, which we just spoilers. This is Liara from the trilogy, and who makes a voice appearance in Andromeda, walking up what at first appears to be a mountain or something. You look a little closer. You look at the cords and the electricals and just the shapes of things here. She's walking up a dead Reaper, as well as if you look in the background here above my camera and to the right, kind of the middle of the screen here, that's another Reaper in the background. It doesn't look as dead because it almost looks like it's standing, but presumably these are all dead Reapers after the events of Mass Effect 3, which means we're also presuming here this is taking place after 3, at least this moment in this trailer. And my decision has been on this, that these Reapers are all dead, due to the destroy ending being the canon or the path that they've gone down for this trailer. Who knows what that means for the greater meaning of everything that's coming later, but for the purposes of this trailer, I've interpreted this as, hey, by the way, destroy ending is going to be canon. That's where we're moving forward. A quick note on the canon situation. I think it'd be super cool if they can make everyone's choices matter and respect everything. I think the Mass Effect got so broad by the end of the trilogy, and Andromeda kind of doesn't affect anything. They're going to have to narrow it down if they want to start the next chapter in the franchise, in my opinion. And picking a canon ending as well as a few other canon choices is probably the best way for them to do that. I suspect this is a clue that they might be doing that. Maybe not. Who knows? Let's move on. Obviously a cool moment here, very nostalgic for many people. This is who we find to be Liara at the top of that hill or whatever, wherever she was going, picking up a piece of broken N7 armor. If you see the helmet beside me over here, it's part of the side, and then the band that goes kind of around the front and the back. One thing I'll mention is that in every N7 day, I guess besides 23 and 24, because they didn't do anything really. Actually, they did. I would say in every N7 day so far, they've referenced Shepard specifically, not just N7s, not just the concept of an N7. Like, to me, N7s are Shepard until they prove that they're not. I know there's lots of N7s in the lore and the story or the world of the game, but we've literally only seen a couple, with Shepard obviously being the main one that we've seen and interacted with. So until they truly make it clear that, just because it says N7 doesn't mean it's Shepard, it does to me. And especially here, Liara, holding this broken piece of armor, just, I don't know, fight me. I think this is a reference to Shepard. Whether that means he's in the next game or she's in the next game, who knows? We have no clue at this point. All I'll say is that the references continue. Here before, so right now it has the figure here in the front, Liara, not focused, but they do have the background focus. So we see that mud skipper, an extremely similar ship to what we saw in that original art, as well as a few figures. This pretty clearly to me is a Solarian, a human, and a Krogan. The human is interesting if you zoom in enough on it with a high enough resolution, version of this video. The armor does look very reminiscent to Andromeda. Maybe that's on purpose. Maybe it's not. It's also worth remembering everything that's in Andromeda, even though it takes place many years after the events of the trilogy, everything in Andromeda came from the Milky Way, all the human stuff or all the Milky Way stuff, right? So all the armors, there obviously during the game, we find that there is some, new kind of bespoke, like new brands and stuff in Andromeda, and there is some original stuff being built. But the majority of the stuff, especially the human armors and things like that, come from Earth or come from the Milky Way. And so the idea that there could be a person in this post Mass Effect 3 world wearing armor that looks similar to the Andromeda armor isn't really all that crazy and shouldn't be. Why is it not included in Mass Effect 3? Well, it's because they didn't know they were making Andromeda. There's also the other thought of this trailer was made like on contract. BioWare didn't make this trailer by hand. I'm sure they advised on it. I'm sure they were heavily involved. But it's also worth considering that when they sent what they wanted to this art house that did this, they very likely just sent Andromeda armor concepts and like schematics and stuff, and that's just what they use. So maybe it means something, maybe it doesn't. Who knows? And then we have the moment. Liara's revealed. It's super duper cool. I'm not even the biggest, I like Liara in the trilogy. But there is just something about seeing this is new. This is after anything we've seen before. When it comes to the actual games, there she is. I believe her voice actress has even said that she is part of the next game, and it's presumed that's going to be the case. Now, the big wrinkle gate here has been people talking about, she has what appears to be like crow's feet around her eyes and maybe a couple of wrinkles on her cheek. A lot of people have said oh, that means that she's way older than she was in the trilogy. And then other people, and it's kind of where I more lie, is this is just a higher quality version of Liara than we've ever seen ever. Maybe this is 600 years after the trilogy. There's a lot of reasons I don't think that makes any sense that we'll kind of get into. But I suspect this is just a higher quality model. Maybe it was on purpose, maybe it wasn't, we don't know. And then it leads to one of my favorite musical moments in the Mass Effect franchise, even though it's just part of a trailer. In the grin. Come on, we have to love the grin right here. And to me, it's just she picks up the obvious, in my opinion, reference to Shepard. We got the armor shard. She stands up. She looks back at these people she's working with, whoever they are. Maybe one day we'll find out. Maybe we won't. And just that grin. I don't know. I love it. And here we go. And that's it. That's that trailer. I just, that's still probably my favorite thing that they've put out, honestly, for the tease of this. There's been some other cool stuff we're going to look at all. That still to this day is probably my favorite thing that we've seen. It's also the thing I'll probably spend the most time on. We'll try to power through the rest of this a little bit quicker. But like I said, I still think that's going to have the most consequence in the long run of all of the all the things we're going to see, until we get actual, they're in full production here. They're going to start showing us actual stuff from the game. I still think that's probably up there. So next we have, so that was 2020. That was at the Game Awards when that trailer was shown. Here is the 2021 N7 day. So they had a blog. I covered that in my other video. Go check that out. But this was a poster that they put on there. I actually have it right there on my wall as well. One thing to keep in mind with this poster is when they sold it, when they originally listed it, the listing for it, and anyone who's followed me long enough knows that I thought I was real hot stuff, like finding this. The description of the poster and in the store, the BioWare merch store, literally was just like, hey, it basically alluded to Shepard survived and he's exploring with his friends the universe post Reaper War, or for lack of that's paraphrasing, right? But I remember that, and I like made a big deal out of it, and it went real crazy. They subsequently edited that description like 4 or 5 times after that, to the point where I think the listing's still on there. If you look, it literally is just like, hey, here's a poster. So again, it goes down to that whole thing of, does the BioWare gear store, did they have inside knowledge? Like, no. The BioWare gear store, if you don't know, is a third-party company that BioWare/EA just contracts with to sell their merch. I assume they also do the procurement of the items and stuff like that. Now, that said, I actually did a podcast with someone at one point that never got posted live, of course, who I believe it was someone who interacted with an old because there was an old BioWare gear store that wasn't this company, and that person kind of basically gave the thing of like, hey, they wouldn't have been allowed to post that original description like without approval from either EA or BioWare, probably BioWare, like a brand manager or something like that. So while obviously this gear store employee who posted that to that website has no inside knowledge, whoever approved that description does, in some capacity. So take it for what you will. To me, that was yet another reference to Shepard, but there's more here. This is the poster. If you remember this blog, Gary McKay, the current CEO of BioWare, mentions 5 things that are meant to be like teasers or clues in this. Well, let's see if we can find them all. So the main one, I think, is the most obvious, is that this is a Geth. Like, this is clearly a Geth here, or at least supposed to be alluding to one. You have the flashlight eye, even like the little lens flare thing, the shape of the head leading down here. One thing that people have pointed out as well is that the Scourge and Andromeda, some of this kind of this kind of rain trailing this watershed area is a little reminiscent of that. Maybe that's fair. I'll also point out in some media we're going to look at next that there's multiple examples of this blue top, brown bottom, this kind of transition. It seems like at least at one point that was kind of a theme to some of their stuff. But let's dive into some other things here. So down here we have Mass Effect Will Continue branding that they carried on from that 2020 trailer. Here we have this ship. This is not the Mud Skipper, or at least it doesn't look like it. This looks like a significantly different ship, where the Mud Skipper had like 2 big engines in the middle. And this one, it looks to be a little more sleek, has just kind of a cooler look into it, in my opinion. The SFX here is the original code name for the first Mass Effect. So at the very least, that's a reference back to the original trilogy. To me, still to this day, the thing I think is the most interesting here, we've got 4 people here. In much of the media for this game, you see 4s. And so it's made me wonder if maybe like Inquisition, the next game, you'll have 3 companions instead of 2. Who knows? But this is a consistent theme, at least in some of the stuff we've seen. There's a few interesting things here. Now, this is hotly debated on who these characters could be, or even what species they are. I'll go through it and say the front one looks a lot like it's a humanoid of some kind. Could be an Asari, could be a human, who knows. This one here is kind of hard to debate. This is obviously a big old Krogan. That's red armor. You don't want to assume Rex, especially because in the trilogy, Rex is already pretty old. Depending on when this next game takes place, or whenever this scene we're looking at, this setup is taking place, that could or may not be Rex. He's not the only one who can wear red, but there is a reference there. This middle one's been interesting. People have debated this pretty heavily, thinking that this is like an Andromeda, like initiative armor human or something like that. To me, it's the kind of the elongated head, as well as what looks like to be like the big collar of the Turian's armor. That's what it looks like to me. This just looks like a Turian to me. And then right here, which has been more debated than I realized, is what appears to be a human, and that's a red striped helmet right there. To me, at least, that is kind of hard to dispute, at least in my very biased opinion. So this is yet another, in my opinion, reference to Shepard. I mean, that just to me appears to be an N7. So I don't know. We'll see. Some other things here, if we zoom out, there are people who have like manipulated this photo and who seem to think that this right here is an N and that there's a 7. Again, I'm not really sure. That seems like a bit of a stretch, but maybe. We do see some interesting stuff as we go up here. So if I zoom in here, this seems pretty obviously to be a dead Geth around this crater up here. And something you'll notice if you kind of scroll around here and you look closely, there appears to be various bodies, and potentially most of them look like Geth. Some people think that they look more like Quarians or potentially other species. It's kind of hard to tell. So I don't know. I think this is such a cool poster. What was interesting is back to Gary McKay's thing of, oh, there's 5 secrets in here. I don't. They've never confirmed or denied any of them, as far as I know. I found the artist who the artist who made this poster was contracted. They're outside of BioWare, and they posted it on their ArtStation recently. In their Instagram. So I went to him. I was like, hey, I messaged them or whatever. I was like, hey, do you know, like, what were the 5 things they told you to put into this poster, to be like the teases or whatever? And he said he didn't know. So either they did it like editing themselves after he did the basic art and they implemented what they wanted, or he's just NDA'd and isn't allowed to say, or he just doesn't want to because some random dude asked him. But at the very least, I love this art. The 2021 N7 day wasn't the biggest thing in the world, but this was I talked about this for a year. so yeah, it was good times. Okay, so the 2022 N7 day to this day is still my favorite one, for various reasons. Now, this was art that was posted on the blog, and we'll just start with it. So there's a few things I want to talk about. So when it comes to the timeline of the next game, lots of people are speculating like 500-600 plus years in the future after the trilogy. My main pushback on that, among many things, is in none of the teasers so far have seen anything that looks like tech that's way in the future. We see these shuttles. These look like the regular Mass Effect trilogy shuttles. Now, this one in particular has a slightly different design. It has the STX thing on it again, the OG Mass Effect code name. But down here, like, we see a Skycar, and some of these other ones. This is exactly the same as the trilogy. So I just think that if you were trying to show in this concept art that this was a city from many, many, many hundreds of years in the future, the vehicles would look at least a little different, but maybe not. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff to see in here as well. A lot of people have pointed out these logos that you see on these buildings all over. These ones, people are like, oh, that's the same logos from Andromeda. This is where I remind people, Andromeda, everything in Andromeda, or most of the stuff in Andromeda from the Milky Way species, including the rebel city and all that stuff, came from Earth. These are corporations that exist, or not Earth, but the Milky Way. These are corporations that existed in the Milky Way and basically were franchising out to Andromeda in some capacity. So, I think that there was an assumption of like, oh, these things were in Andromeda, so they've come back from Andromeda and brought these logos with them, when it's, at least in my opinion, way more likely that these are brands or whatever that were in the Milky Way and in Andromeda, because they went, they sponsored, the Nexus trip or something. I don't know. A few other things that are interesting here. Up here, we have an Omega logo on this big building. It seems somewhat ominous that maybe Arya is still kicking in whatever this timeline is, or at least what came after, her, and maybe someone carried on the Omega brand. It's worth considering. I believe in the trilogy, Arya is either Arya or Liara's mom are considered to be the oldest Asari that we interact with in the series. So even if this doesn't take place that long after the trilogy, Arya still being alive is like kind of like questionable a little bit, even though they do live so long. We also see down here an Asari on this advertisement. This is almost certainly some Asari city. Whether it's like rebuilt Thessia or not, obviously we have no idea. Another reason I think it's almost guaranteed to be in Asari city is on Ilium. If you ever look out into the cityscape around the map that you play on, you see these big lit up circles out in the distance. You see another one here. There's one right there. These appear to be some kind of building that are like on Asari world. So I don't know if they're housing or if they're event centers or whatever, but that's a very consistent branding that they've shown that we've seen in multiple places where the Asari are. So yeah, we have like a logo there, logo there, logo there. We have the Omega thing there, the Asari there, all those things. It's a cool piece of art. It's a cool piece of concept art here. Okay, so there's more of that. We'll get to it. But this was the big thing they showed off. So this is a video that they showed that was at the end of the 2022 in 7-day blog. Now, this is basically just a little motion graphic. This is a newer version of old art, which I'll show you in a few minutes. But this, for all intents and purposes, appears to be a Mass Effect relay, mostly because of the big spinning kind of cylindrical shape thing here in the middle. Except this one isn't complete. This one appears to be under construction. We see there's a ship here carrying pieces of it, either building it or taking it apart. Who knows? There's a bunch of stuff about this we'll get into in a higher quality picture. But first I'll play this audio that came along with this. So when people heard this initially, people pretty quickly were like, I think there's more to this than what they're showing us. And there was. There was audio hidden in this. Now, there's something I do want to point out while we're still looking at it. I'm actually going to mute it. Notice these lines that come across the screen. Like if I go back here, where this doesn't look like we are necessarily looking at, right there. I think, and we'll get into this deeper as we look into some of the other stuff, I think we are looking at a monitor, a screen in this little video. I don't think that we're actually like in space looking at this. There's multiple reasons for that. We'll get into it, but just keep that in mind. So people took that audio and I don't know how, whether they flipped it or they did something, but they figured out a way to hear like the encrypted message, and this is what it was.
Exactly. The Council will be furious. Although they should know by now not to underestimate instinctive plans. That's worse than was predicting. Exactly.
So that's Liara, pretty obviously speaking to someone, and speaking and saying something along the lines of, they should have expected this human defiance is what most people have decided she's saying there. Who knows what that means? That's gonna be one of those things I think we'll look back at one day and be like, oh, that's what she's talking about. I mean, if we're just looking at that relay, and I'll go to the next picture. Here's the high quality picture of it. Maybe in the post Mass Effect 3 world, humans are feeling kind of high and mighty. They're wanting to mess with Mass Effect fields, build their own relays. Maybe that's what this is. Maybe they're, my theory on this has been that this was a Cerberus project during the Reaper War, or before that, to make their own Mass Effect relays. And then the post-war, when Cerberus has been destroyed for the most part, humans have taken over this project to be like, kind of reminiscent of World War II, like, hey, they were the bad guys, but they were onto some stuff. And especially in the events of Mass Effect 3, the relays may not be in the best shape, and maybe they need to continue that project. So I'm wondering if this kind of work has been like outlawed by the council, and humans are just basically being like YOLO, and they're going for it anyways. Even back to the very first game, when you talk to Liara about humans, she talks about how they're like scared of humans because humans are so ambitious and so aggressive and things like that. That's how I've interpreted this so far. Now there's lots and lots of other things here to look at. Let's see, let's get into it. So let's start down here. So this little thing has been a pretty large topic of conversation. They have pointed out that it talks about this vacuum dock relay, and it said monitoring station operated by Green Dagger Limited, property of Deep Space, DHOW, SAV, ship captain, Sub Narvok, Shall Rise Zillion Jones. This is kind of curious because that is a Quarian name, but Jones is not. So I feel like this is like kind of a little bit of a nod to like, hey, we might be having some humans marrying Quarians here. So for whatever that's worth, you can take it for whatever you want. The vacuum dock relay construction record, I think that this is surveillance footage or security footage of some kind. And it's being done by this monitoring station operated by Green Dagger Limited, property of Deep Space, DHOW, SAV. This is potentially a human ship that's being used to do this, whether the people know they're watching it or not. Now, this is for interior use only. There is some theory, and even I believe this file name is straight from BioWare, and it talks about SA Intercept Cytherium System Doc 314. So this is presumably the whole Relay 314. I believe that was with the a known thing in the whole deal, but this is an intercept, a communication intercept. We are likely listening to Liara talk to someone in this little clip, and she doesn't know we're listening. Has been my what I've presumed for a while at this point. A lot of people have assumed she's talking to a Geth because they're like clicking and static and all that. The Geth speak to the Milky Way species and like through the translator, and so if a Geth would just have a voice. I assume whoever she's talking to is encrypting their side of the chat to a point where whoever's surveilling can't break it. So we're only getting Liara's side of this conversation. Lots of other things here. One thing that's kind of fun to look at here, there's a pretty obvious reference here where it has I believe it's hidden in there, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I assume these are supposed to be like docking pods or something. There's a little antenna coming out of the fourth one. Presumably this is what ships would dock to. This seems to me like a reference to the fourth game. There's all of this like chatter about Mass Effect 4, Mass Effect 5, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's gonna have a subtitle. I don't think this is gonna be a numbered game, the next one. I took this as they're showing that this stuff is happening. This is maybe a hint that this is a sequel to 3. It's a pretty big stretch, but who knows. Few other things here that I think are kind of interesting. When I was talking about the amount of time after the trilogy to wherever we're looking at here, these ships look a whole lot like the ships from the original trilogy, the big cargo ships and all that. They're obviously using these to construct this device. We do have this ship down here that looks kind of like the Normandy, but that's probably just hopium on my part. In the motion graphic, this thing is moving. This ship down here with the blue trail behind it. One of the really interesting things here is this ship. Oh, of course I can't. There we go. Right above my camera. This ship here and these ships off in the distance and this ship right here. Those are all using the Nexus kind of design language of having the ship with those 4 big like kind of blades, almost like a parachute looking thing out behind them. I believe the whole idea of that is that the Nexus ships that were going to Andromeda were using like a more advanced FTL technology that would make them go faster to get to Andromeda a little bit quicker, even though it still took 600 years. And I've seen people be like, oh, those are arcs or whatever. I don't think these are arcs, all these ships. I just suspect that people, in post Mass Effect 3 discovered the technology the Andromeda mission used and implemented it into more regular ships. And that's what these appear to be, at least to me. I've also speculated that maybe the Initiative, who did the Andromeda Initiative, whoever built all those ships and everything, not everyone went on that mission. And I think it's very possible that there could be like a faction or something in the next game that is the remnants of the Andromeda Initiative, even to the point that the founder of it and the benefactor, the mysterious benefactor and all that. I've speculated for a while that they may just be a straight up faction in the next game, because everyone who was left behind maybe would have banded together and tried to ride out the Reaper War and things like that. The last thing I'll do, and it's probably my most maybe paranoid one, if you look under my camera here, so we can presume we're looking at a screen here. We can say that by looking at, there's some weird reflections, like glare, some stuff like here. And then I think there's a reflection. And like I said before, there are references, I think, to Shepard in basically every N7 day so far. Maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's something more. There's two things to look at here. One is you see these 4 circles here. I'm assuming this is just supposed to be like a ship that's below the clouds potentially, but that's not what I'm looking at. What I'm looking at here is what looks like 3 stripes to me. So here's a white stripe, here's a big thick red stripe, and then here's another thinner white stripe. I think that's supposed to be an N7 who's looking at this screen, and that's supposed to be just the subtlest of hints that someone is looking here. If we look here, this is if you need a better demonstration of what I'm talking about. Here's the original image, and then here is my very, very fancy Microsoft Paint rendition of it. So if you kind of see what I'm talking about, you see the white stripe there, white stripe here, big red stripe all in here, and then another white stripe there. This is very reminiscent to the opening of Mass Effect 1, in my opinion. I think this is a direct reference to that. Again, maybe it means nothing. Maybe it's nostalgia bait. Maybe it's just something that for weirdos like me to notice, or maybe I'm making it up. I don't think I am, to be very clear. But that's what I'm seeing there. Now this is this is the art that is referenced. This is in the, I think the maybe 20th anniversary art book or something for BioWare, or is like 10th anniversary, 15th, something like that. This is from that. Now there's a lot of big differences here. The general idea is very similar. We still have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 here with the little docking thing coming out. We have the incomplete, what appears to be a mass relay. But there's a lot of differences. If you look at these ships, they are very different. These are very different looking ships that do look way more futuristic and different from the trilogy, where the newer version of this does not. You also look in the background. This appears to be, I assume, a planet that is like completely industrialized. Like that looks like it is just all solid, like city, concrete, whatever. Like where in the other one, it's, there's clouds and things like that. You can even see below the clouds. It looks like there's like roads or some kind of constructions below it. So a very different vibe, but a similar thing. But we're missing those Andromeda looking ships. We're missing the Normandy looking ship down here on the right that's moving. There's a lot of things missing as well. But this came years before that concept art we got, and seems to be something that they were building off of. Now, in the blog for the 2022 N7 day, they had the various bits of what appeared to be new concept art. This is still, to this day, my favorite one. This is very obviously the Citadel. We see a big bright light behind there, presumably a sun or a star. What's interesting about this, though, isn't this ship right here, but it kind of is. It's not that the Citadel appears to be completely blacked out. To me, the interesting part here is that there's a planet, or some kind of object, because the system that the Citadel is in during the trilogy up until the very end, where it gets moved to the Sol system, has no planet, has no bodies in it. It just has a star, a center. So this is this presumes the Citadel is not in its original location in the trilogy, that it's somewhere else. And we know at the end of the trilogy, it got moved to the Sol system. And so my assumption is that we are seeing the complete, not fallen apart, not broken apart Citadel, likely orbiting Earth in the Sol system. And either this is Earth and it's just way far off, or this is the moon. And they're kind of trying to show that. Now there's no lights or anything on the Citadel. Maybe, the story is going to be that it got fixed up, but no one uses it for whatever reason. Maybe they can't find a way on it. I don't know, but this is still to this day one of my favorite pieces of art, and it's literally just part of a little banner on the 2022 N7 Day blog. This was art that was, I believe, posted in that blog, and then Mike Gamble posted it himself later, a higher quality version of it. I don't know what to take from this one. There's obviously these really interesting structures in the background. Who's to know? And you can see there's a bunch of them. If this is like an ESO mining thing, if this is Omega, maybe, if this is like a terraforming, device or something they're using, kind of like what's on the Krogan home planet. I don't know. Some of the things we do see here, though, are we see a Turian here who appears to be wearing a mask. Same with this Solarian in the background, and this hose indicates that maybe this Krogan is as well, which if a Krogan has to wear a mask, that means it must be pretty bad with all their redundant organs and so on. So we have a Turian there. We have a couple other folks there that look familiar. This is these are old school trilogy era Skykars that we're seeing on all of these. And then one small thing that's really cool is over here, all the way on the right, it's the solar, and I forget what the second word is, but this, you see this exact same sign in Omega in the marketplace area. So, maybe it was just reusing some assets for some concept art, which is probably what it is. But at the very least, I think this is interesting, even though I feel like there's basically nothing to take from it because we just don't know enough. Then we move to 2023. So this one, the blog had like nothing really that crazy in it, except it had a bunch of like cryptic kind of misspelled words and things like that. People figured it out, that it led to a website, which came in 3 parts. And so it started off with this one. And so what you see is this access code accepted post Nebula. Warning, security breach detected, Contact Systems Alliance, Epsilon, Oculon, Nebula. And this led to a little 10-second clip. And now this is the full trailer, I believe, down here, which we'll look at in a minute. But this was the first part of a trailer that they showed in the 2023 N7 Day. This was the second part. It said access code, or maybe I might have these mixed up. That might have been the last one. But this one says access code. I think this is the first one. Access code Oculon 2819 Defiance. Access code accepted. Tertiary encryption detected. Classified. Review briefing materials on Alliance official comms channels. Here, this was the first part of the trailer, I believe. That was the second part. This is the first one. This was the first thing we saw. It said access code Epsilon, access code accepted, secondary encryption detected, a bunch of these mumbo jumbo, Andromeda distress signal detected, year sent redacted, audio transcript, although they should know by now not to underestimate human redacted. Defiance would be the name. Obviously a reference back to that 2021 audio bit that we decrypted and we heard Liara talking to somebody. And then it has this trailer. So we have Andromeda mentioned, which is crazy, and a distress signal. My early guess on this is that Arc 6 that got launched in that 2020 trailer didn't even make it out of the Milky Way. And we're going to have a distress signal from it, and that's going to kick something off. We'll see. Because this, the other one references 2819, which isn't way far in the future. And then this year sent is redacted. Because if they posted this and it was sent 600 years later, and it was, the Andromeda Initiative that was having all these problems in the game that we played, they sent back a signal. Well, that wouldn't have, that would be way in the future, and very likely wouldn't be even relevant at this point. Now, if a ship that went to Andromeda was trying to go to Andromeda just straight up didn't make it, then maybe this would, explain that to a point. Okay, so here I have the actual trailer. Okay, so a few things. One thing to know is that the reveal of this trailer took like 5 hours. They released it in 3 parts, and it took 5 hours to get that 30-second trailer. It was cool. It wasn't the best payoff in the world, but it was still interesting. Now, something to consider here. This is the first time we don't see the branding with will continue. This is the first time it just says Mass Effect. They don't have a subtitle. They don't have a number. It's just Mass Effect. So keep that in mind. Now, if we go back, the first thing we see here are these steps. We see what we come to find is an N7, someone, we don't know who, who's walking down this hallway. Some things I've seen people point out is if you look through these windows, you can see like sky cars going by and stuff. I guess I must not be keen-eyed enough. This does look like buildings and stuff in the background. We have the classic N7 stripe here. They did end up selling this jacket, which is kind of funny. We see here a very, very classic look of like the old school N7 armor from the trilogy, except this has got like a trench coat attached to it, which is kind of neat. You even see like the N7 on the back of the neck here and stuff like that. And then we get this look at this. So they have like this really bright red, kind of plush looking trench coat that they're wearing here that, you assume it all folds over like an old school, like military jacket or something. This is similar to an Andromeda. The N7 armor there has that like folded over like lapel or whatever. It kind of gives me some of those vibes. This helmet is like something I don't think we've ever really seen before in Andromeda or the trilogy. Obviously it has kind of Andromeda looks to it to a point, but we haven't seen this before. They turn, they give a look to someone or something, and then they turn back. They pull out this gun that doesn't look like anything we've ever seen before. And the speculation I've seen is it looks like they're walking out of this like docking bay or something to a ship. Who knows? That's hard to tell. I don't know if this was worth the squeeze necessarily, the 5 hour wait. It was exciting though. There was definitely points where, like right here, the second trailer ended like here, or the first one ended here. And the next 10 seconds, we thought for sure they were going to turn it. It was going to be FemShep. And they would be like, this was going to be like the big reveal, like, oh no, FemShep's back, or, Shepard's back in general. But that's not what happened. Yeah, this is, it is cool. I will say this looks like something that they probably did in-house. This would be one of the first things that we've seen that they very likely did themselves, their own like cinematic team, which is kind of exciting in its own way. But like this is like one of the premier things I can think of that we're going to look back at this one day and be like, oh, okay, I know who this is. Like, I don't think this is the protagonist for what it's worth. I suspect this is going to be maybe not an antagonist, but maybe someone who will be pursuing in some capacity. This does definitely give the vibe, not so much of like a super soldier, like what we saw with Shepard and them being an N7. This gives me much more vibes of like, kind of like intelligence and things like that, like operational intelligence and things like that, spying and those things. And it's worth considering that in the past and in the last 5 years, if you see the Mass Effect account reference the fans, they refer to them as agents. So just throw it out there. There's at least one tweet where they do that, and there might be multiple. So just something to think about. So after that trailer came out, they showed off this poster, which at first glance was like, oh wow, okay, we have Mass Effect. It just says Mass Effect. There's no subtitle. We see the same character again. We can kind of, get in there and see maybe a little more detail. We see the cool looking jacket, the cool looking gun, and all that. And then we see this. And this is as far as it's gonna let me zoom in on this, but there is a bunch of stuff going on in here. So this appears to be a bar of some kind somewhere. We don't know where, we don't know when, whatever. There's a lot to take from here. So if it was bigger, I would be able to show you that right here is an Asari sitting at a table speaking to an Angara who appears to have a bodyguard who appears to be a Geth. Kind of interesting. There's some Krogans back here and a very chunky Volus. There's what appears to be a Solarian right here, but he doesn't look quite like other Solarians we've seen. There is that we know from the comics and stuff. There's those like really beastly Solarians, and I assume that's what he is here. But this guy right here, let me see. No, it's not gonna let me zoom in more. This right here, I believe, is our first look at a new species in the franchise, or an old one that we're seeing for the first time. And I believe that right there is a Ralloy, one of the bird people. So we'll have to see about that. There's a few other interesting things here. There is a Hanar right here with bling that's wearing jewelry, which is interesting. There's also a jellyfish in this water tank, which I think is kind of offensive, but that's a different conversation. There is there's a Turian right here that has Garrus's little holographic sight thing. Could many Turians have that and not just not just Garrus? Obviously, but what references are references, at least in my opinion. There's also some speculation that I believe it's right here. There's two people sitting, and one of them is wearing a hat, much like Joker's. So I've really gone back and forth on this in what it may or may not be. I suspect that this is more of a reference than a, hey, yo, the next game is gonna have Angarans and Geth in the same place, even though that makes no sense in what we know so far about the franchise. Maybe not, I don't know. Again, like almost all of this stuff, I suspect it's very much going to be a looking back at this one day when the game comes out and being like, oh, I should have realized. And regardless, I think it's pretty cool. Okay, and then we move to 2024. So I'm literally not even going to show the graphic they put up for 2024 because it's just some text of them being like, hey, we've been busy with Veilguard, and so we don't really have anything for N7 Day this year. See you next time. What they did do was they released some cosmetics in Dragon Age the Veilguard. So on N7 Day, if you logged in the Veilguard, you would pop up this thing, hey, there's a new equipment left for you or something. So you would go, you'd find this box, and there was a letter on it, and you could open the box. And if you open the letter, this is what you saw. It would say, I guess this chest got lost in the Fade, and someone shepherded it to our doorstep. Is it just me, or does the armor look somehow familiar, like something an old friend would wear? From Harding, who's one of the characters in Veilguard and in Dragon Age in general. Interesting. And when you opened it, you got 3 pieces of armor / cosmetics. So the first one is the command helmet, and the description of it says, a mark of leadership, an accentuated stripe the color of blood serves as a reminder of the lost. And it has like a little tagline here of Beyond the Stars. Pretty obvious reference there to N7. There's this kind of cosmetic armor set here that says Spectre of Battles Past. Formal enough to face a war council while still functional on the battlefield. This is the Beyond the Stars collection as well. I think this is kind of interesting. This is very clearly the trench coat armor, or a reference to it, from the 2023 trailer, and having it say something along the lines of formal enough to face the war council while still being functional in the battlefield. So it just, to me, is alluding to like, this is just like a trench coat armor, like for whatever that may mean. That's all this is. And then the final one here, this one was a little strange because I didn't really fully understand what it was referencing, because it doesn't really look like armor that we have necessarily, but it says paragon of leadership appearance here. A modern practical fit makes this perfect armor for operatives trusted with command. And you know, it's to me at least, that's yet another reference to Commander Shepard. And that's what we've gotten so far. Obviously there's been, you know, rumors and tweets and all that stuff. A lot of that stuff I just don't think is really worth talking about that much yet. I'm sure one day it will be, and maybe even after this N7 day it will be. I have no idea. Obviously, if you're watching this, you know, in the weeks before N7 day, you probably know about all of the crazy stuff happening at EA, potentially with BioWare. My kind of stance on this is I'm going to cover this stuff until there's nothing to cover. So either until a game comes out and then I'll just be playing the game and we'll be talking about that, or, you know, less exciting things happen, right? I don't see any reason to worry about things I can't control. So my plan is to cover that news and to talk about those things and those possibilities, but for the most part to just focus on the fun part of this stuff. And for me, who likes to make Mass Effect content, even if there's no content to really make, this is the best part of the year for doing this stuff. So I think you cover this stuff with keeping those situations in mind, but you don't dwell on it, because like I saw in that Insider Gaming article, if you saw it, where some devs spoke to them, the end of the article is a dev saying like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to keep working until I'm told not to work anymore. And, you know, that's just all I can do. And I kind of feel the same. So I hope you enjoyed this. If I missed anything, if there's interpretations that I got wrong, or if there's info I missed, please let me know down in the comments. I'm always happy to learn more. But I think I covered everything pretty well. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you like Mass Effect, if you want to keep up on what's going on with the next game, with N7 day, analysis of all that stuff and so on. Please like the video so more people see it. Consider becoming a YouTube member so you can get videos like this one just a bit early, as well as some other perks. If you want to see the other content I'm making, check out the links in the description of the video. That is all I have. So until next time.